Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. I'm really excited to share some of my work with you. So as I was introduced, my work is on designing interactive systems to support stress awareness and reflection. So I'd like to share a personal story to give some insight to my work and how stress affected my performance. So after my first psychology class in high school, this is me at 16, I noticed the hair. I thought I really wanted to be a counselor. And so as an undergrad, I signed up to volunteer for a crisis line. And I'm really excited to get some experience and training toward this goal. And crisis line, right? So after signed up, I went through this training program. It was about a month long, and we simulated some calls and practiced how we should respond. And we got some verbal feedback from the trainers, and then we kind of went on our way. Training program ends, I begin volunteering, and after about a month in, I got my first serious call. And I panicked. My stress just completely went through the roof, and I forgot everything that we had learned. So fortunately, however, there was a professional there. We were partnered with a professional who was able to seamlessly take over, fortunately. After the fact, he shared with me that my reaction was not unique. It was something that he had seen many times before. So I came away from this experience with an understanding that in addition to the obvious importance of developing the skills and the knowledge that's required for the job, it's also really important to address the affective experience and the affective impact of the work, the emotional impact of the work, because how we respond in these situations can be, have some serious consequences, right? And a little bit of a spoiler, I did not pursue counseling as a career, hence the computer science degrees. But I continue to work in this area. So what happens when we experience stress? So most theories agree that there's some stimulus, right? So for me, it was a phone call that results in external and internal changes in the body, right? So we might have some facial expressions, body expressions might change. Internally, we experience changes in our physiological responses due to our autonomic nervous system activating, right? So we might start to sweat more, and this is our electrodermal activity. So now let's take this training situation where we have paramedic teams in emergency response training. So before we can start designing systems for paramedic trainees, which are important for them to be able to visualize and identify the experience, the stress experience that they're undergoing, we need to be able to understand the dynamics of the team, what's happening during the interaction. And one dynamic of team interaction is physiological synchrony. And this is the response, the dynamic linking of the physiological responses between two or more people. And we know that this happens in a lot of different contexts and a lot of different interactions. And what we don't know is what's happening during the simulations and what in terms of when they're in synchrony and when they're out of synchrony. So to get a bigger picture of this, we're developing a model of physiological synchrony that uses the trainees' sweat response, so their electrodermal activity. So this is during their simulations. And this model gives us a continuous measure of their physiological synchrony throughout the entire simulation. And you can see that it fluctuates, and we know that people go in and out of synchrony. But what's happening here in these high periods and these low periods? So another dynamic of team interaction is communication, right? So we're in looking at the communication that's occurring during these high and low periods, we're seeing an inverse relationship. So that means we're seeing more communication, and the trainees are perceived to be experiencing more stress when they're in these low synchrony periods. And the conversation that's happening is a little bit more combative between teammates. Whereas in the high synchrony periods, we're seeing less communication and a little lower perceived stress. And the conversation is a little bit more helpful. The teammates are offering help to each other a little bit more, indicating a greater cohesion within the team. So in designing the stress awareness system, which you see here on the right, it allows trainees to, it's providing them with their contextualized training data for them to make sense of and to be able to identify and understand their experience, and to tie specific events that trigger stress to specific interaction behaviors. So this system provides both their verbal information as well as visual information for them to reflect on, as well as their external behaviors and some internal information from their electrodermal activity. So the trainees see their own response, they see a measure of their team's response, and then they see a measure of the entire cohort's response as well, which allows them to place themselves within the larger group and get an enhanced picture of the relationship between them, their connections, right? So we're getting a sense of how they relate to each other. And they can use this to reflect on their experience. So in evaluating this system from a related project and from theory, we expect that the system will actually facilitate deeper reflection than without the system. So just in reviewing, in reflecting on the experiences without the system, we expect the system to provide that greater sense of deeper reflection, because we know that instructional technologies that split the incoming information between the verbal and the visual channels makes use of both processing systems, allowing for more of the cognitive resources to be used, which reduces the mental effort required to engage in reflection. So the last connection that I want to stress here is the connection between my research and its theoretical underpinnings. In order to understand our individual experiences, we need to be able to see ourselves as elements within a system. And the systems that I develop allow users to reflect on themselves as interconnected parts of a whole, and provide an extra dimension of awareness that's necessary for achieving a deeper understanding of oneself. So thank you, and I want to say thank you to my collaborators and my connections in this project.